everybody. Hi. Good to see all your faces. My name is Lorna Ruby. I'm the adult book buyer for Wellesley Books, which is right down the street. And this is I usually do 2 book talks a year. We focus on summer reading in the early spring review thing, and we talk about what you might want to give as gift-giving books or what you might want to be reading for the winter. Thank you for coming. And the book list itself is 2-sided. I have fiction on the front and nonfiction on the back. I brought every book with me, and I carried them all in tote bags. And as I say at the bottom of the back, you can buy any of the books that I brought with me today. If I talk about it so much that you desperately want to take it home and start reading it, just come up afterwards, and I'll write down your debit card information and bring it back to the store and ring it through. The other thing that's on the bottom of this list is the phone number for the store and also my email address. Most days I'm in the basement of the bookstore. That's where my office is. I come upstairs to do displays and do other things, so you may or may not see me. But if you ever want to see me and you're in the store, just ask somebody at the cash register and say, "Is Lorna in?" And I'm in Monday through Friday, like 10 to 6. So feel free to stop by. The other thing that I do, if you lose your copy of the list, I have a notebook that's called Book Talk List, and it will have a copy of this list if you lose it or forget it or just want to remind yourself about something you were going to look at. It'll be in the store as soon as I go back to the store today. At the back counter in the kids section, just go up to the cashier there and say, "Hey, Lorna did a book talk. Can I look at the list in the book talk list?" So there we go. I don't know anyone who has read Liane Moriarty before. I have only read a couple of her books. This is her latest. It's called Here One Moment. It is absolutely fabulous. And what I liked most about it is the fact that the plot is just so different. You just don't know how she's going to resolve it. So there are a bunch of characters. They're all getting onto a plane. They've had a delay. You get to meet a lot of the people on the plane, and there's an elderly woman. And at some point, everything's resolved. They start flying, and she stands up, and she looks at people in the seats of the plane. She points to them, and she tells them their age and the method that they're going to die. And she does the whole plane. Now you can imagine, right? In some of them, some people are kind of shocked. Other people think, could she be joking? Or if you hear that you're going to pass away at 99 from old age, then you're pretty happy with their thing, and so you're fine. But the stewardesses are trying to get to her. And so that's the plot of the book. And so it's so cool how she finally resolves it. And again, you get to know quite a few of the people on the plane, what happens in their lives, once they get off the plane, what the backstory of the elderly woman is. It's just so inventive and so different. That's what I liked most about it. The next book on the list, you may recognize Marjan Kamali. She lives locally, I think, in Lexington. Her first book was The Stationery Shop, which I know a lot of book clubs have used as a book club option. This new one is The Lion Women of Tehran. We actually had her at the bookstore. She also has been speaking at libraries. You may get a chance to see her yet. This is the story of 2 young women growing up in Iran. One comes from a family of means, but they meet in school. The other young girl doesn't have as much financial support. They meet, they become friends, and then their circumstances both change again. And so it's sort of their coming of age and how they rely on each other throughout their lives. I haven't read it yet. The next book on the list is Carla's Choice by Nick Harkaway. Nick Harkaway is actually Jean le Carré's son. Jean le Carré, of course, was a pen name. He has passed away, and so his son, who is a novelist in his own right, has taken up the character of George Smiley, and so he's continuing his father's legacy here. So this story takes, if you've read their spy novels, they've been very popular throughout the years. This book takes place between The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. So it's a continuation of two of his dad's previous books, and it's gotten rave reviews. The next book on the list, they were in perfect order when I put them into the bag, and I've messed them up here. This is Paula Hawkins' The Blue Hour. You may recognize her from The Girl on the Train. It was her first big breakout bestseller thriller. I am not a thriller reader. I'm a mystery reader. I'm a fiction reader. I just don't usually like thrillers. But I read Girl on the Train just because everybody was reading it, and I just wanted to know how it ended. I wasn't a big fan. But they say that this is her best book yet. All the reviews are pointing that way. A lot of authors are loving it, and it was also chosen as a Good Morning America. I do like the idea of this one. There is a house on an island. It is off the coast of Scotland, and there's no bridge to it, but every 12 hours with the tide, you can actually get to the island. So there is a woman who is an artist who she and her husband lived in the house for many, many years. He disappears at some point. She finally passes away, and a new person comes to live in the house. One of the artist's piece of work has been sold to a new gallery. There's an art expert there, and he looks at the piece of art, and he sees that there's a human bone worked into a piece of her art. And so that sends him to the island and to the house to figure out what happened. They say it's fabulous. And like I said, I may read it. All right. So bad. The next one on the list is Sally Rooney. This is her third novel. She's Irish. Her first two, a lot of like young people, romance, relationships, that kind of thing. This one is a little bit different. It's the story of two brothers. One is a lawyer, very successful. The younger one is a chess champion. You can see the chess motif that they've added to the cover of the book. And they have become distant relationship-wise from each other, but their father passes away. So the novel investigates their relationship and how they're both dealing with grief. The next one is The Life Impossible by Matt Haig. He, of course, is the author of The Midnight Library, which was a best-selling book. I never read The Midnight Library, but I chose to read The Life Impossible. It's the story of a woman who was a math teacher, and she's getting older, and she doesn't really have many friends or relations in her life. And she gets a letter from a lawyer saying that an old acquaintance of hers, somebody she taught with years ago, has left her the house on this Greek island. And she's just curious enough that she decides to go, because who wouldn't want to investigate a house that you're left on a Greek island? All is a little odd, how she died. She learns about her friend's life, how she died. She meets the people in her lives, and things are happening on the island, like flowers are growing, and so it has some ocean diving. She died while she was diving in the ocean. So there's a little magical realism to go along with the straightforward story, but I really did enjoy it. And that's what, has anyone read Midnight Library? So that has a little bit of, it's a real story, but there's also a little magical part to it. I enjoyed it. Let's see. All right, now, Elizabeth Strout. Usually I don't have to introduce Elizabeth Strout. This is another story set in Maine. I read it, I really enjoyed it, and the publishers were kind enough to send us a map so that we could finally understand all the characters that are connected. How are the Burgess boys connected to the Kitteridges? So that's this side of it. But this is the best side ever. If you can see this, I'm going to try to do this so that the video people can still hear me talk. So along the top here is all of her books that she set in Maine. And then along the side are the names of the characters. And if you look over here to this left side, you'll see all the characters that are in this new book. So if you enjoyed any of the other stories, even if you've just read a few, because I haven't read the Burgess Boys yet. So it's actually a really fun, instructive way to think, wow, all those people. So it's not just Olive that you see again, sorry. It's others. If you want to look at this, I think no, it doesn't. They sent us like 5 of them. What I was going to say, though, I brought it with me if you want to look at it. I'm, besides being the book buyer, I do the social media for the store. So I'm always taking pictures and posting things on Facebook or Instagram and other places. So I was going to post it on Facebook if I could get this into a picture. I was also going to ask the publisher if they might consider putting this information when the book comes out in paperback, because I think it's actually pretty cool. So I did enjoy Tell Me Everything, and I'm glad that I have the connections. But I can't tell you what they are, honestly.
Should you read her other books?
I don't think you have to read her other books first at all, really. When I look at this list, I started with Olive Kitteridge, which was not my favorite. No, because each one introduces you to people, you know who they are, things happen to them. It's when they reappear in the other stories that you start to put the connections together, so you don't have to do them. You could start with this one and go backwards. All right. Most of the books that I brought with me are books from the major publishers. There's like 6 major publishers. We order from all of them plus more. Most of the major publishers are still doing things in large print. I can add after the fact, go through my list and put a little asterisk if it's available in large print, or audio if people do audio. But off the top of my head, I think Elizabeth Strout is usually also in large print. She's also in audio. But my next list, I'll make a mental note, which I have to write down because I can't remember anything. So I'm just going to put Mark, large print, and audio. The other thing, if you've come to my book talks before, I work in Wellesley, but I live in North Attleboro. So I drive an hour to get to work every day and an hour home, and I listen to a lot of books on audio. I think I've always liked books on audio anyways, even when I had shorter commutes, but that actually allows me to read even more because I also can speed up the audio. So if I talk fast, it's because I'm always listening to my audios at a really high speed. All right, so Creation Lake. I have not read Creation Lake yet. It's by Rachel Kushner. I don't think actually I've tried. There are actually authors I haven't tried yet. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, which is the prize for fiction that they award in England. It's open to anyone who writes in the English language. She did not win. Nor did James, which was the book I kind of wanted to win. It was a book called Orbital that a young woman wrote about a space station, and she was shocked that she won. They put it on YouTube yesterday. We sold out of all the copies of the book that we have, but we'll be getting it back in like in a week or so. And I didn't add it to my list because I didn't really have it and I haven't read it yet. But Rachel Kushner was up for it, which just means, I mean, she writes serious literature. But this one is about a young woman who is actually a spy, and she's been sent to France to infiltrate this group of eco-activists. They're sort of holdout in, it's a contemporary or near future kind of story. They're holdout in the woods, and their leader is very charismatic, so she joins them and gets to know them and has a relationship with the leader, and that's the gist of the book. As I said, I haven't read it yet. Next on the list is something that I have read and something that a lot of people at our bookstore read and loved. It's All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. He's the author of We Begin at the End, which has been a very popular novel. Basically, it's the story of the small town. There is a young man who has to wear an eye patch. His mom is a single mom who's kind of struggling. He doesn't really fit in, but he does have a best friend, a young girl who's a neighbor, and she lives with her grandmother. And so it's about their friendship when girls start to go missing, and he is walking through the woods one day and sees a classmate being kidnapped, and he intervenes and saves her. So he becomes like this hero. So the rest of the book is his life as he becomes an adult, his best friend's life. She becomes an FBI agent, and the young man sort of starts to be like a Robin Hood, where he steals from the rich and gives to the poor. So the two best friends are at odds, and that's the gist of the rest of the book. It has a lot of interesting characters, and the relationship between the two is very good. Next, if it was in the right, I think I'm back to being in the right order, I hope. All right, The History of Sound. It's a collection of stories. Does anyone love short stories in the room? Oh, excellent. I'm very happy to hear that, because a lot of times if I say it's a short story collection, they're like, oh, I don't read short stories. There's a whole month dedicated to short stories that we always celebrate at the bookstore, because I'm always trying to convince people. But it's like reading a really good novel, but in a really short, compact form over and over again. So this is Ben Shattuck. He lives in Massachusetts. He and his wife, Jenny Slate, who is also a writer and a comedian and does movies, they run a general store in southeastern Mass. Yeah. Oh, good. So they both write books. She writes essays that are very funny. He's written books about Thoreau and before, but this is his first book of fiction. It's set in New England, and for each story that occurs, there's another story that happens after. So there's something set on Nantucket, and there's a young woman, and it's early days, and there's a painting, and then it might appear in another story. So there's a little connectedness to it that makes it really intriguing. And of course, I love New England settings, and I think he did an excellent job. There are stories about artists and farmers, and I really enjoyed it. The next one is Playground. It's the latest book from Richard Powers. He wrote Overstory, which was an epic book about trees. I actually haven't read that yet, but this is like that, except for it's an epic book about the ocean. There are multiple characters, but it really centers around the ocean. And also the cover is the stunning cover. I've really enjoyed getting to know the characters. It's one of those where it took me a little bit of time to keep them straight because the story changes. And you have to be like, oh, yeah, it's the boys in the school who know each other. Oh, it's the people on the island. But it all comes together in the end. And another book that almost felt like short stories, we had Edward Burns. Edward Burns is the actor, an Irish-American. The Brothers McMullen is one of his movies. This is his first novel, and it is a novel based on his childhood growing up in Long Island. I do believe the cover is an actual picture of him. He grew up on Marlborough Street, and every year for his birthday, his dad made him climb the street sign, and his dad would take his picture. His dad was a cop. His mom was a homemaker. He had an older brother. And it's like one of those old-fashioned novels about a family that was really enjoyable, and it's not too long. So I would highly recommend this, especially the interaction between the parents, the two brothers, and then the young boy's relationship with both his mom and his dad, and the way their life changes. The Mistress in the Key is a thriller from Ben Mesrick. Ben Mesrick has written a lot of nonfiction, but he's also writing some thriller mysteries, and this is his second one. What is he famous for his nonfiction? Because I've read it. Bringing Down the House. Right, yeah, that was his first bestseller, I think. He wrote one called Woolly about the woolly mammoth, and Rigged, Busting Vegas, Breaking Twitter, Bitcoin Billionaires. Anyways, he and his wife live in Boston. They're great friends of the bookstore. And so this is his latest thriller. Okay, so I haven't read a lot of Ann Patchett, but who here is Bel Canto their favorite Ann Patchett? Yeah. And I find that the first book of any author I read often is my favorite, just the introduction. So Ann Patchett, it's the anniversary of its publishing. A lot of times they ask the author to go back and say something for like an anniversary edition. And she reread it, and she had problems with it. So she talked her editor and publisher into doing this an annotated edition for the anniversary. And it's the coolest thing ever because like I said, she reread it and wanted to change a few things or add a few things. So if you can see, there are blue notes on each of the pages. That's Anne rereading her book and making comments about it, which, when you think about it, wouldn't you love to hear what a lot of your favorite authors had to say about their books after the fact, if they annotated it? So that's what this is. It's the anniversary edition, and she has made comments or what she was feeling or what she was intending, all sorts of interesting things. And that's one that I haven't read yet. The next one on the list is Lazarus Man by Richard Price. This is a brand new novel. It's set in Harlem, and it's about this building in Harlem that catches on fire and is destroyed. So it's about the people in the neighborhood, what actually happened to the building, their lives. There are lots of different characters. One of our former booksellers read it and absolutely loved it. So I tried to do a mixture of books for men and women, and I tried not to add too many female authors on the list. All right, the last two, I don't know if I've ever talked about the Kamigawa Food Detectives, but the new book by that author is The Restaurant of Lost Recipes. Now, if you recognize this, there's a lot of Japanese bestsellers that are being published in the US, and they're coming in this sweet, little format, and they always have very gentle titles. These are feel-good kind of stories. So the gist of it is there is a father and a daughter. They have a restaurant, and the father is the chef, and the daughter is the hostess, and they're in a little back neighborhood that you can hardly find. The dad used to be a policeman, and so they put an ad, like in a food magazine, that they were food detectives, and that if you were missing a recipe or a dish from your childhood or from anywhere, if you want it put back together again and find out about it, you come to them. So people come to their restaurant knowing that they want them to find out, their dad made the best bento box before they would go on their, they were an athlete, before they went on their game day, and they want them to recreate it. So they tell the story of it, they take all their information, they come back 2 weeks later, and he has magically investigated and found out what the secret ingredient was and shares it with. They're just so heartwarming stories, and all the characters who come to the restaurant are different, and the same thing happens in both books. You have a question? Midnight Diner?
It's about a small
Oh.
from 1870.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot.
I don't know Midnight Diner, and oh. So she's saying that she just read a book called Midnight Diner that is set.
No, it's Netflix.
Well, me and Netflix. It's on my phone, and yet I never watch. It's a TV show. Usually they say, usually the publisher will say, oh, and it's going to be on Netflix when they sell us, but they never said that, so I don't know. Well, these are absolutely lovely and enjoyable, and I would highly recommend. And the first thing he does is he cooks this big lunch for the person, and I don't know Japanese food well enough to know all the ins and outs, but the description of the food is just amazing. And then, like I said, they come back, and he's recreated it. So, all right. So now just a little group of mysteries, because as I said, I read or listen to a lot of mysteries, so I know there's usually some mystery lovers in the crowd, so I try to feed the need, as it were. The first one, of course, is Louise Penny's 19th Gamache book, Gray Wolf. It just come out. I read it and really enjoyed it. I love anything that happens in Three Pines and advances that storyline of how they know each other and how they love each other and depend on each other. The police part of it is another one of those where it's corruption, and I just get a little tired of corruption, but it's everywhere, so I don't know why. But the Gray Wolf comes from a Native American fable where a grandfather is supposedly talking to his young grandson, and the grandfather says, within you, you have a black wolf and a gray wolf, and the black wolf is full of anger and viciousness and war, and the gray wolf is through kindness and light, and those two parts of you are always warring with each other. And the grandson says, how can I make the gray wolf be the wolf that I'm more? And the grandfather says, you feed the wolf that you want to lead your life. So it's better told by Louise Penny. But I did see Louise Penny when she was in Boston, and she's lovely and funny, and the other great part of this book is they go back to the monastery. There's a monastery early on, there's a murder, and so Gamache he's allowed to go in and investigate. The monastery comes back, so she tells great stories. Another Another, well, British in this case, writer who tells great stories. It's Richard Osman. This is a standalone. It's not part of the Thursday Murder Club, so new characters, but just as enjoyable. There is a young woman who appears to be like security bodyguard. That's what her job is. And her father-in-law is a retired policeman, and she gets involved in something that she has to call him in on. So it's funny and interesting and enjoyable. If you've come to my book talk before, you know how much I love all things Kate Atkinson. So she writes historical fiction. She's written short stories that I have raved about. This is part of her detective series. The detective is Jackson Brodie. She hasn't written about him in quite a while. It's been quite a few years. In fact, they thought maybe she wasn't going to write another Jackson Brodie story. The great part about this is it's always set in England, and he was a policeman, but now he's a private eye. It's not one of those, they tell the story straight. It's one of those stories where you get to know a lot of the people. So there's a lot of threads that you read about, and Jackson becomes involved and he's part of it, but it all comes together. So it's not just straight him telling you what he's investigating. You learn about the people first. So I really enjoy them. This is the latest. The first one, if the book is very helpful and tells me what the first one is, I try to do that. Started Early, Took My Dog, perhaps, is the first one. One Good Turn is another one. Case Histories is another one. They did make, the BBC made a movie, a little series that I saw on Masterpiece, I think. They took two of his plots and stuck them together. But I would highly recommend getting these, if you haven't already. And now, a very odd story. You can tell by the title, Pony Confidential, and there's a little horseshoe. The subtitle is One Small Pony, One Big Mystery. So if you liked the Remarkably Bright Creature, where you got a story told by an octopus and then you got a story about people and it's involved in interaction, then you will like this story, because part of the story is told by a pony and the other part is told about people, one of whom is the young girl who the pony loved, and something happened in her life, and he was sold, and he's been forever angry about it. So he starts off as a bitter pony, but then, of course, so there are other animals. When he is telling the story, he's interacting with other animals, and animals can communicate. And as a pony, he's been very good. He can't speak to people, but he can sort of act in a way that people kind of understand how he's feeling and what he's doing. It really was enjoyable. Once I got past the angry pony part, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The beginning, I wasn't quite sure, because angry, bitter ponies. He's upset because she abandoned him, and she was his life. But somebody finally tells him, I think he's at a house with a goat and a big old bloodhound, and they're like, no, she loved you. She's in trouble. You have to find out what happened to her. It's just very clever how the pony finds her and helps solve the problems. And I just started this one last night because I knew I was going to be talking about it. It's Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret. Now, Benjamin Stevenson, I think, has two other books. The first one was My Family Has Killed Somebody. Everyone in my family has killed somebody. And then the other one is about a train. So this is a Christmas story. And yeah, Everyone in This Train is a Suspect is his second book, and Everyone in My Family Has Killed Somebody is his first. This is a festive mystery. And he writes a prologue what the character is writing the prologue. And he says there are 24 chapters to this book, so it's really like an Advent calendar where you can read one every day. And like if you had a chocolate Advent calendar. Some people are patient and they eat one a day, and some people just eat all the chocolate at once. So you could read the book all at once, or you could do it like an Advent calendar. And I'm just going to read this little blurb. I'm aware of the irony that this book may be wrapped under a tree at some point. So let's start there. So if you give it as a Christmas present, it will not be an Advent calendar, but there are 24 chapters. So that's what I'm going to do since I have a copy of this at home. And my new favorite mystery writer is Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. It's set in San Francisco. It's an elderly mom who has a tea shop, who really basically only has one customer left. She has a son who is a high-powered lawyer that she texts all the time, and he hardly ever responds to her. So she's, just like there have been books about how Jewish moms are famously trying to be involved in their children's lives. This is a Chinese-American mom who's really trying to help her son out and teach him the right things to do. But she goes down to her tea house one morning, and there's a dead body there. And she decides she's going to help the police solve the crime. So she marks the body, and she keeps waiting for CSI to show up, and the police just aren't that impressed with all of her skills. She takes something that they don't have access to, and she puts an obituary in the paper and decides that the people who come to her tea shop will be her suspects. So she gets involved in their lives. It's just so enjoyable and entertaining. And there is a mystery, and she does solve it. All right. So now we turn the page over to nonfiction, which I tend to go a little bit faster through just because I haven't read all of them yet, but in my piles. So the first one is Paris in Ruins. The subtitle is Love, War, and the Birth of Impressionism. Sebastian Smee is the author. He wrote a book a few years ago called The Art of Rivalry, which was a huge bestseller for us, Four Friendships in Modern Art. So this is about the artists in France during the Revolution that sort of started Impressionism as a reaction. Some were trapped in Paris as things were happening. Some were outside of Paris. There's also a love story between Monet and Morisot. So it's 1870 and 1871. It's gotten rave reviews, and I think if you are interested, he's going to be at the Needham Free Library in January to do a book talk. The friends there do Sunday book talks, and they get some good authors, and Wellesley Books supplies the book, so I know for a fact. You can go on their website if you want to hear from him. I love British history. I don't read a lot of British history, but it always appeals to me. So this is Queen Victoria and her prime ministers, her life, the imperial ideal, and the politics and turmoil that shaped her extraordinary reign. So she reigned for 60 years. She started when she was a teenage girl, and they always had prime ministers. And she loved some of them, and she hated some of them. And so the author, Anne Somerset, who is a British historian, has had access to, I guess, royal papers that weren't seen, and has put this together. And I, with all my watching PBS shows, can at least recognize Mr. Gladstone and Lord Salisbury, but not all 10 of the prime ministers that are listed in here. But it's on my list of things to read for sure. The next one is Alexei Naval. I've been saying his name, and I wanted to, there's an extra Kyrie. Alexei is how you say his first name, Navalny. He, of course, is the Russian activist who was killed in prison. He was poisoned first, and he and his wife were traveling And so he recovered from poisoning while in Germany, and then came back to Russia because he wasn't going to let anything stop him from, exposing all the crime and graft and things going on in the Russian government. He started writing in prison this memoir. So it talks about his childhood, it talks about his political awakening and who he voted for when he was young and what he stood for and what he was trying to accomplish. So political biographies aren't things that I usually read, but I was looking at the reviews, and Rachel Maddow, who interviewed his wife afterwards. I haven't seen those interviews. I guess they were on CBS. She was on CBS this morning too, but Rachel Maddow was skimming it so she could then do an interview, but she said it was so fascinating that she just kept reading. So I'm actually listening to it right now. A British actor is voicing Alexei's voice, but it's fascinating. And what I don't know about Russian governments and politicians, I'm now learning. The next on the list is a World War II book from Sonia Purnell, who is the author of A Woman of No Importance, and she also wrote a book about Churchill's wife, Clementine. The subtitle, Kingmaker is the title, and the subtitle is Pamela Harriman's Astounding Life of Power, Seduction, and Intrigue. So Pamela Harriman was Churchill's daughter-in-law, and they recruited her to be a spy during the war to infiltrate within British society, Germans into the Nazis, and so the story is told here. And Book and Dagger by Elise Graham. I just love the title, Book and Dagger. So this is how scholars and librarians became the unlikely spies of World War II. So on the same idea that when they first started intelligence agencies, so this is U.S. intelligence at the Office of Strategic Services, which was the precursor to the CIA, they started recruiting academics, people from universities, because they had the knowledge, and then they had to teach them all the spy stuff. And so this is her talking about who got involved early on and who are the spies that did the most during World War II. And now in a totally different direction, the Every Valley by Charles King. The subtitle is The Desperate Lives and Troubled Times That Made Handel's Messiah. So I, as a singer, both in high school and college, I can do lots of parts of Handel's Messiah, the first soprano part, and it's the history of Handel and the history of the music, and it's a good gift for anyone who loves singing and church music especially, and the Messiah specifically. So there's two books that are sort of social history. The Revenge of the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. I think a lot of kids in high school have had to read The Tipping Point for years. It was the 25th anniversary, and Malcolm Gladwell, a la Ann Patchett, decided to read it again. And as he was reading it, he was like, why did I think that? This is not what I should have said, that kind of thing. So this isn't a retelling or a fixing of The Tipping Point, but looking at where we are now, and the idea of the tipping point is he compares it to and sort of not an epic. What did we have? COVID was a super spreader. They'll never give me this mic again. anyways, he's talking more contemporary. He's taking what he learned from Tipping Point, what he would have changed about Tipping Point, but bringing it into this century and things that are of concerns to us today, AI and just things, how things go viral so much faster, it seems, today than they did in the old days. So he's looking at that. And Yuval Noah Harari, who had a bestseller called Sapiens, he too is looking at how information and communication has changed. He starts in early history and he brings it up to now, bringing in all of our worries today, of course, which are artificial intelligence and social media and computers taking over things. So there's that. And now just a few nature ones. We love Cy Montgomery, and this is another little snippet of a book from Cy Montgomery. She's done octopus and hawks and hummingbirds. This is chickens, and I love the little fact that is in the front of this book that most people know chickens, but there are 20% more chickens on Earth than people. And I don't know if I personally know 3 friends who all have chickens. So anyways, she does a great, wonderful job of bringing together history and the ways they've been bred and the way their lives have changed our lives, that kind of thing. And this came out in the spring, but we still have copies, and it seems like it's the perfect Christmas gift for the bird watcher in your family. It's the Backyard Bird Chronicles of the author, Amy Tan. So during COVID, she lives on the West Coast. She was spending a lot of time looking out her windows, and she has a drawing talent. She started doing drawings of the birds and journal entries. She also got really involved with the local Audubon Society. If she found a dead bird in her yard, she would put it in her freezer and then bring it to them because, you know, they're always trying to find out what killed birds and what's affecting birds' lives. It's not just the neighborhood cats. But at the beginning, she thanks her husband for all of his patience and the fact that she has done this to him. But there's a lot of nice drawings and a lot of her take and research on things. Even the end papers of this book are beautifully done with her art. And every once in a while, the publisher sends us a book plate. And so this is we have a limited amount of signed book plates with Amy Tan's signature that we're tucking inside the book. So I brought one of those with me today. And just a few sports things because, yay, the Celtics won. They're wonderful. So this is the Boston Globe story of the Celtics. It appropriately has Larry Bird on the cover. And so it's filled with articles throughout the years and pictures from the Globe for all of your hardcore Celtics fans. And I think last year there was Why We Love Baseball by Joe Posnanski, and this year we have Why We Love Football. So he's looked at the history of football, 100 moments that he thinks were important and pivotal, and writes beautifully descriptions of why football is the great game that it is. And now some celebrity biographies, memoirs. I'm taking this because it's Shirley MacLaine, and we all know she's written books before, books of memoirs, books of her past lives. She's done lots of things. But what she has actually also done is live a really full life with a lot of friends and family. So she has walls and walls in her many homes of family photographs, photographs of fellow celebrities, photographs of, she was very political at one point. She was very much for Democrats. There's her brother, Warren Beatty, before and after. There's pictures of Elizabeth Taylor and people from her movie career with tiny descriptions of what happened. So in every home, she has these memories, and she looks at them, and she decided she would share the stories behind it. So some of them are a little bit longer than others. Some are very short, but they're all wonderful. And it's relationships in her lives, her movies and things. So I found it very entertaining, certainly for a fan of Hollywood in those days also. And something also that we're all old enough to remember, Carson the Magnificent, of course, Johnny Carson, who turned late-night television talk show into pretty much what it is today. This was a biography that was started. It started as an article. The author, Bill Zahim, was writing for things like Rolling Stone and Esquire, and he, when Carson retired, had access to Carson himself. So he wrote the article, and then all of Carson's friends, Carson got sick and died, and all of his friends were like, oh, you need to expand it. We'll talk to you some more, and you can write a full biography, because he had a full life. And so he worked on it for years. He had a storage unit full of documentation and photographs, and he had a research assistant, Mike Thomas, and then the author himself got cancer and died. So he had started the book, and then it was finished by his research assistant, Mike Thomas. And it really is one of those, warts and all kind of full life biographies. I love this cover. It's Al Pacino, Sonny Boy. Who doesn't remember nice, young, good-looking Al Pacino? So he is looking back on his life growing up in the Bronx, in the kind of house. He had a single mom. His parents separated early on, so he was always looking for the father figure, and he often lived with aunts and uncles and cousins in like a very small apartment. They had one that they rented as long as a Pacino was in it. The rent was $38.35 in the Bronx, and so he lived there for a really long time. So it's his movie career, I had to actually Google what his relationships were, because I kind of forgot after a while how many women he had been with. He was with Diane Keaton at some point, and twice in his lifetime, accountants that he had that was handling all of his money screwed him over, so that he went from being a millionaire who was willing to give the teacher at one of his son's school money to help him out, to having nothing and having to do lots of crazy movies. But he's a really smart man. He loved reading. He loved the psychology behind the acting career, and so I really did enjoy it, and I thought much more about him after having actually listened to it. So the two best cookbooks that aren't really cookbooks are the Ina Garten memoir and the Stanley Tucci. His is called What I Ate in 1 Year, and it goes day by day what he was doing and what he was eating. Where he at the beginning of this, he's going to Italy because he's filming that Conclave movie. He does actually have some recipes in it, and he really tells a great story, as we can know from his last book. And Ina's book was a nice revelation. She had a difficult childhood. Her whole story of her romance with her beloved husband Jeffrey is spelled out in here, and all of the steps of her career. So I found that very entertaining too. And lastly, but not leastly, if you are a fan of Gilmore Girls, or you know somebody who is a Gilmore Girl fan, there are two books here for you. Kelly Bishop, of course, played Mrs. Gilmore. And, but she started off life as a ballerina who then wanted to dance on the Broadway stage, and she was in the original cast of A Chorus Line. And she had a really interesting life, a very determined woman who really wanted to make her way in her chosen career and her relationships along the way. Very entertaining and interesting, and very grateful for her time. She was famous before Gilmore Girls, but she's famous to a whole different generation because of it. And Anne Hood, who still lives in Providence and in New York City, I think I recommended her last novel, The Stolen Child, in last year's, the last time I was here. This is called Life Short, Talk Fast, and it's 15 writers on why we can't stop watching Gilmore Girls. So it's Anne Hood and other very good writers, whether they grew up watching it or whether they rediscovered it during COVID, when they were watching with their children, dads even loving it. So really an interesting, good writers talking about their experience with this iconic TV show. And that's it. I know, great, thank you. Thanks. So as I said, if anybody wants a book, just come up and I'll take your information and you can walk away with a book so I don't have to carry it through. God only knows how the video came out with me knocking over the microphone, but if you want to watch it, I still have more copies of the list if anybody needs it, and thank you. And I'll keep reading, and then I'll see you, I guess, in the spring. All right? And I'm in the store anytime you want.